All right, welcome back. We are Game 2007. That's Multiplayer Game Design 1 in the Winter 2026 semester at Georgian, and it's Week 8, Part 2 of our broadcast and recording. I have a question. How long would you predict it take for the average student to complete for assignment 3? Is that what you were asking, Alex? If you're on your own, or are you with your partner? Do you have a partner, by the way? That's the question, right? So, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, how long will it take to complete? I'm going to give you, about the test, sorry. Okay, sorry. So the question is about the test. How long will it take to complete? Again, it'll be metered for about 2 hours. I'm going to try and do that. Some people may take longer, than that. It is going to be in person, as far as I know. I'm not planning to be away in the second half too much. It is what it is, but that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be in person, and so it can't be more than a couple hours. That's what it was, but that's how it's going to be metered. It's not going to be a very lots of tasks to do. I want to make sure that for the exam, I want to make sure that you guys are able to do it in class. Okay, so back to what we're doing now. So what I want to do is I want to create an item struct and data table. So let's bring up our project. And just like we've done in the past, I'm going to do this now. Now there's some folders we've been using. So content, we have a structures folder. But it'd be nice if we had an enums folder. Let's put that in there. So let's make a new folder called enums for enumerations. And we can move our current enums in there. That's the first thing I want to do. So under blueprints, if you go there, and if you go under interactables, there will be an equipable type enum. I want you to move that in the enums folder. So let's do that first. So put all that there. And we have another enum in potions called potion type. Let's take that and also put that in the enums folder. So that's the first thing I want to do, just reorganize a bit. So this is where we're going to put our enums. So so back to this, what it's going to basically say is let's make a new enum called item ID. This is the enum. So again, enums are a great way of organizing stuff. So again, it's under blueprint enumeration, and I want to call it item ID. Under the item ID, I want to add an enumerator, and the first one is empty. We'll see how this works together with everything we're doing. Next one is health potion, and so on. And sword, shield, and key. Sword, shield, and key. Okay, so that's the first thing, and that's the enum item ID that we've added in, and that is in the enums folder. It also asks us to rename equipable type to item type. Okay, because we had an equipable type before, and now we're going to make it an item type because it's going to be for multiple use. So equipable type, we're just going to rename this to item type. All right, so that's the only difference there. So item type and item ID, those are the two that we have. Let's put this up on DevOps. Okay, so that's the first thing we're doing. Next, what I want to do next is I want to add in a new struct called BPS item info. So let's do that. So that'll be under structures. So again, a new, if I go to blueprint, structure, BPS item info, and this will be the item info for each item in our inventory. Okay, so the first one is going to be of type E item ID. So it's going to be called item ID. So item ID of type E item ID. The next one is going to be the item type. So item type of type E item type. Okay. The next one is going to be the item name of type text. And you're going to see why text as we move forward. I could have chosen string, but you'll see why. Item image, this is neat. So this is a 2D texture. So item image, and we want to have texture 2D, object reference. Okay. And then, sorry, description, current stack, and max stack. So item description, text, current stack, integer, and max stack. So I'm kind of setting you up nicely for stackable items. Okay, so save that. And that is your enum. Okay. Sorry, that's your struct for item info. And we're going to use that with our data table in a second. So now we need a data table. That's the next one. So we're going to say a data table is found under the miscellaneous full, menu item. We're going to go to data table, and we're going to base it off BPS item info, the one we just made. Now you could also make a data table from a file. There's lots of ways to do this, but we're going to just do that. So there's data table, and we're going to call this dt_item info, if I'm not wrong. There it is. DT item data, sorry, is what it's called. Item data. So when we open this up, notice there's nothing in there. We want to add in a new item. Remember, for this, you need to rename the item. The first one is going to be named empty. So if it's an empty item. And then there's the item ID, the defaults. This defaults to whatever you put in the struct, right? So if the struct had some whatever defaults it has, each item in the table will have the same. So what we want now is to discuss some things here. I'm going to zoom in so you can see some of these choices that I've made. So one of them is item ID and item type. There's two different things here. So for example, empty and none is correct. Item name should also be empty here. Item image, here I show a engine resources item called black. You can certainly make it a black item, but the way to do this would be just to search for black, and then it's going to find an engine resource that is a black texture that it's going to add in here. But you can also find one that is gray. So there is 127 gray, which is also not a bad kind of default. I'm going to use 127 gray as a default image when it's empty. Okay, that's what it's going to be. Item description is going to be empty, and it's going to be 00. So that's going to be the first one. So save. Next, we're going to add in health potion. So let's show you how to do that. Rename again, health potion. Okay, and instead of empty, it's going to be a health potion, and it's going to be of type consumable. So that's where it comes in, right? Item name, health potion. item description, you can actually make it, write it nicely, health potion or whatever else, more detailed description that you want. For the item image, I'm going to reference our assets, our icon assets, which is reagent 12b. That's what it is. So I type in reagent 12, and you can see that there's two. I like this one, 12b. So that's the one it's going to look like. It's going to have a current stack of 1 when it's added in, and maximum is 99. Again, when you're testing, guys, 99. It's not something that I want you guys to go to like 100 items and then all of a sudden it just make it smaller, make it 9, make it 5, you know, for testing. It's too crazy. Okay, let's continue with this. So then the new one is going to be a regen potion. So again, rename first. So regen potion, so potion of regeneration, right? So there's regen potion. It's a consumable type. Regen potion is something you can put there as an item name. Some people put other shorter. This is almost like a short name for the item. But this is what's going to appear there. You know, regeneration potion, right? 1, maybe 99 for a current stack. New. Next one is going to be sword, then shield, and key. So sword, rename. It's not going to be empty. It's going to be a sword type. And again, it could be weapon instead of sword. It's going to be a right-hand weapon instead of a, you know, kind of something else. The item name will be sword. The picture, if I just type in sword, you can see there's a sword texture that comes up. That's the one I want you to use. That's what it'll appear in the item description. And then it's 1, but maximum stack for this one, we'll leave it at 1, so you can only have 1 sword ever equipped. Same thing with shields. So I'll make this so that, let's rename this. So it's shields. I'm going to pick shield here. Again, this could be like defense instead of like there's a weapon, there's a defense. If you wanted to, it's going to be a left-handed weapon. We could have changed this enum so it says left-hand item instead of left-hand weapon. You know, and there's also one we could have put in, which is either left or right hand. You know, it's up to you. There's different ways of doing this same thing. And again, I've given you a shield that you can use here. These are the same. You can see there's 3 things that are the same for redundancy. But remember, what you could do is add a longer item description, like the Shield of Faith or something like that. And that's what you put in here. Item name is something that you're going to be doing. You know, you can do a lookup item ID. Same thing. You can use one thing and the other thing for. There's different reasons why you'd want things to be like this. Again, item name could be a short name, like Shield of Faith might be. You know, if it was something like that, it would be SOF, as an example, a small, you know, kind of code from a lookup perspective. Current stack will be 1. Maximum stack will be 1. And then the next one is a key type. Let's just make that name to key. But I'm just showing you there's like options. You don't have to make it so that it's a key. You know, it could be like silver key, you know, as an example, or gold key. It's a tool, you know, item would be a key. And then you could choose key. I've given you a key that you can use, you know, for your item description would be, you know, key. Maybe we want to call this gold key because that's what it is. And then you can have unlimited keys, 99. Let's say different keys. Maybe instead of the way it works right now, where you use a key, you know, to open a door, and then you have that key open, and you've got a key equipped forever. Maybe in another iteration of this, when you use a key, when you open a door, that key is gone. It breaks, right? So you know, kind of like what we do in Elden Ring, where you use a key to open up, you know, a kind of like a treasure room or an area that you can get other items. Okay, so that's kind of the way it was. It's almost like a consumable instead of a tool. All right, you can do it that way as well. All right, so now that we have our item data, we have the basics for what we need to do. I'm going to put that up on DevOps. Oh. Added DT item data. Okay. Right, this is good. We've got a good start. happening right now. And the next part, once we've got our data table, by the way, I've given you another location for items for your inventory if you want to, you know, the items I've given you aren't enough. So if you can actually go there, there's a free, you know, kind of icon site that you can use. So there's icons and stickers and animated icons and a bunch of stuff like that. Flat icon is what it's called, but if you look for something like, I don't know, knife, then there's different knives. You know, maybe you have other items in there, like for example a chest, you know, or some kind of backpack. And so you can see that there are different items. If you wanted to add something like this in inventory, there might be something that's suitable for you for the game, you know, for your assignment 3. Okay, so remember, you're going to add different items in inventory. I want you to fill up the inventory with items. Maybe there's also coins. Maybe you can hold, you know, some coins. Maybe you can only hold 99 coins. So you can actually download this one. And when you download it, you know, as an example, it might tell you, you know, what are you using this for? You know, so if you click download, there's 2 ways of doing it. The free download, if you do a free download, then you have to give an attribution to the creator, you know, as an example, and that's fine if you're going to sell this game. But for you know, purposes that we're using, it's pretty good. So that is a nice thing I've given you, and so that way you've got a choice of adding in some other icons. There's other sites out there too, of course, that give you other options. I'm just trying to give you something quick, so that way if you don't have a place to go, or if you haven't seen anything, then that's a bad thing. All right, so let's go back to MP character now and modify some stuff. So this is our first modification. Now that we have our data table and our enums, we have to add in some variables that make sense. So the first one we're going to add in is inventory size, which is an integer. So inventory size, okay, that's an integer. And let's set that value right now to 8. Okay, that's not in the PowerPoint, but you need to have an inventory size. You have to specify how big your inventory is going to be. We want to expose this, like, sorry, you know, kind of make it so it's instance editable and also replicate it. All right, so we want to make sure it's replicated, is turned on. I also want to make sure that the category is inventory properties, so it's organized. And let's add the next one. So the next one is going to be inventory of type BPS item info. So this is the actual inventory itself. So this is of type BPS item info. And it's not just one, it's an array of items. That's what the inventory is, an array of items of this type, right? Like all the details. A couple things for this one. Let's change the properties, so it's inventory properties. The other thing I want to do is, from a replication perspective, let's use rep notify for this one. So rep notify creates an on rep inventory, and we need to do this because the inventory is going to be captured in a user interface, and so when the inventory is updated, we want our user interface also to be updated, and so we need to have an event for this. And instead of making our own custom event, we're going to use, you know, the stuff that's built in for multiplayer, so that we kind of, you know, trigger a rebuild of the inventory that you're going to see soon. So that's kind of the first part. Rep notify is what we want this one to be. Next, we want to add in selected item index and selected item. So we want to hold in memory the selected item index. So which one did we select, if we're going to select one? We're not going to use that today, but we will use it next week when we kind of start selecting items and showing which items we've selected. And then the selected item itself, which is going to be a single of BPS item info. So which item have I selected? That's what this is. Both of these should be just replicated normally. So again, it should be just replicated, because every person, every player will have their own item that they're going to have. Both of these also will be inside of the inventory properties. So please organize yourself accordingly. Inventory properties. There we go. Compile and save. Then there's player index. We want to keep track of each of the players. And we're going to, again, make this an integer. We haven't had need to do this until now, but it's kind of a good thing to do. The last one we can't add yet because we don't have a player inventory HUD yet. We're going to create that in a second. Okay, so we're going to do this after this next section. So now we have a few variables, replicated variables that we're going to be using for our inventory. Next, what we want to do now is let's make the user interface. So this is going to be different. You probably haven't done this before with user interface stuff, you know, in the past. So let's do this. We're going to make a new widget blueprint called inventory item. So again, I'm going to compile and save, go over here, and inside of our HUD folder, I'm going to add a new user interface widget blueprint of type user widget called WBP inventory item. So what this is, instead of it being, it's almost like a building block that I'm going to be using for the inventory. This represents each item as it appears in the inventory, not the whole inventory itself, just each item, like the actual item itself. So for this is a trick. We're going to go to fill screen on the right, and I want you to choose custom on screen. So instead of it being, you know, what it was here before, it's going to be, our item is going to be 75 by 75. That's how big the item is going to be on the screen. Okay. So that's the first thing we want to do. The next thing is we want to add a scale box with a child size box. So again, if I look for scale box, let's add that in, and then a child size box. Here it is. And the size box, okay, is what we want to do is we want to change the width and height override 75. So again, there's the width and height override right here. We change these to 75. So what we're doing is we're defining an area, you know, for what this thing looks like. This is like this square that's going to be representing your inventory icon item or whatever. Next week we'll also add a little, you know, kind of a bubble at the top on the bottom right that's going to indicate the number, right, as well. Okay, so that's what we've done there, and we've added in our scale box. The next thing we want to do is we want to add a canvas panel to the size box. So in the size box, we're going to add a canvas itself. So it's a very small canvas panel, a container, that's going to be added here, right? And the canvas panel, in the canvas panels, we're going to add a button called item button. So again, another button. Here's the button itself. And this will be called item button because you want to be able to click on the inventory item. And so because you're clicking or pressing onto it with your finger, if you're playing a game with an iPad or something like that, then it's going to be a button that it's going to represent, item button. We want it to be a variable, and let's configure it a bit. So the item button, we are going to set the property to image property to black and set the anchors to full. So again, image property, right? So if it go to the style, and if I go to normal, and notice there's an image property, let's set this to black. So this will be the black that we're going to get from our, you know, our items, right? And we want to set this to full. This is the anchor that we're going to use. Notice the anchor goes full like this, and then what we want is if I set this to 0 and 0, notice that it fills in all the entire area there. So again, if I look at the item button, I've set everything to 0, but the anchors are full. So basically what it does is it fills the space. That's what it does. Okay, so that's what the button will look like. Okay, now one more thing that we want to add in is a text element, which is just a text box. Here is, and drag this into the button, and this text block will be called the item name. Also, we want to make this a variable. It's too big, so let's change the font size to 12 regular. So again, under style for the text box, we're going to go into font, change the size to 12 and regular, and let's make sure it says none for now. So it just should say none. Make sure it's variable, and the item button, I'll be okay. And this should be item name. There we go. Okay, so item button, item name, that's what it should look like. And that is your, for the most part, your design for your widget blueprint. Okay, it should look like this. Now what we need to do is we're going to have a new, we're going to go to the event graph, the graph here, and notice that there's a bunch of these things, right? So I don't need the pre-construct event or the event tick. We can get rid of those. I do need a new function, and this is going to be called setIcon. So that's what the function is going to be, right? And we also need a couple variables. So let's go and add those two variables. So the first one is item info, right? So new variable item info of type BPS item info. This one is what we want. We want to kind of expose that. And from a replication perspective, so far, let's leave it as is. Player index, that's something we need as well. Let's add that in, player index. And we're also going to make that an integer. Let's also expose that so we can see it. So those two things. Now notice it says make them instance editable and expose on spawn. So expose on spawn is something when we spawn, or we will be spawning these items, we need to have these both expose as spawn. That means when I'm creating my widget, it's going to have a couple of extra inputs in here compared to what I had before. Some people had issues with this when I gave it to you on the other test. Okay, so expose on spawn. When you spawn something, when you spawn something, it actually has inputs. It's important to know that. Okay, so compile and save. So that's this one, and then we want to create this new function called setIcon. So new function setIcon. SetIcon is going to set the icon of this item, and what we're going to do is it's a kind of a multi-page one. So we're going to say get the item info. Here it is, and whatever the item info is, we're going to break this. Now remember, because it's a struct, we can decide which items we want to show. All I care about is the item ID, and so I can hide disconnected pins and just show the item ID. That's the one I want, to make it a little simpler than what I've shown here. We want to check to see if this is equal to an enum that's empty, right? So is it empty? That's what we're saying here. And if it is, branch, this is the if statement, right? If the item, the icon, that is the information for the icon that is empty, then what we want to do is, this is new. You haven't seen this before. We want to make a slate brush. So let's do that. So we're going to configure the style. So if I go make slate brush, again, this is something where we have many pins. And what we can do is we can only turn on the ones we need. Right now, we don't need any of them except for image. So if I kind of turn all of them off and then turn on image size, and I want to split the struct pin, then I want to make this so that it's 32 by 32. That's the size of the image for the slate brush. Okay, 32 by 32. And then what we want to do is, from a button style perspective, that's what is an output here. Button style, slate brush. I want to create a new, make a new button style. Okay, so let's do that next. So back to this. So we'll say make button style, and I don't need all of this stuff, right? Because the slate brush that we're going to get is going to work for, just the normal button. So not hovered, not pressed, not disabled. Just the normal button is the thing that we're going to use. So back to this, we can get rid of some of these. So I can, again, hide disconnected pins and just go normal. So for the normal state of the button, when it's just there, right, because it's empty, then it creates a button style. Now what I can do is I can get the button, and then I can set the style for the button to whatever the button style I just made is. So basically it's a 32 by 32 you know, kind of size of the button, and that's what it's going to be. Okay, and I'm just making it so that it's just going to change the size of the button right now. So that's the style that I'm adding in. I'm going to put that there, and this is when the button is, the icon is empty. It's not going to have a special image or none of that, right? It's just going to have the default style of, you know, the button that we have. So that's the set style. The other thing we want to do is set the text, and set is enabled, right? So again, set text, that's the item name, and then set text, and we're going to set the text to none, right? Because that's the default. If there's nothing there, we don't want anything in there at all. This is for each icon that's inside of your inventory that's going to show, right? And the other one is set is enabled. So it's actually not going to be something that can do anything unless there's something in it. So we're going to say item button, right? And then set is enabled. And it's by default, the item is not enabled, right? So it's not like you can do anything with it. It's not going to respond to a button click if you click on it and it's empty. Right now, this week, we're not doing the button click, but next week we are. And then you have to make it so that if you press an empty button, it doesn't do any, empty inventory slot doesn't do anything right now, at least in our use case. Okay, so that is the first part. And again, I've simplified these so it's a little thinner, and that's why it looks like this. And so really what we're doing is we're setting the item icon to be gray and show none, right? Well, it's kind of gray, but that's the default style that we're going to show. One other thing that we can do before we continue is on the designer side, for the image, for the item button itself, there is an image size. Right now the image size is like 2048 by 2048. That's crazy. Let's change the image size to 32 by 32, all right? Because that's how it should be, 32 by 32 for the image, okay? Once we change the image size for the normal state, this is the normal state, hovered, pressed. There's different states when you kind of interact with the button. Notice that if I go to the image size, they're all now 32 by 32. Because I changed one, all of them change to be the same size. Okay? Back to this. So now that we've done this part, and this is where is set the item icon to show none, basically. So set item icon to show none. That's what we're doing there. And let's change this to black, because that's the color I like. You can change it to whatever color you like. Next, what we want to do is, what about if there is an icon there? Okay, there actually is an inventory item that we want to do. Well, we want to get that information. So we're going to get the item info again. And this time what we want to do is we want to break it. Let's break it. And so what we want to do is we need the item image this time, right? That's what we need. So we don't need all this stuff. Get rid of it. All we care about is the item image. And what we want to do again is make a slate brush. Make slate brush. So a slate brush is kind of like a style that allows us to choose different things like the tint or the image size or whatever. So what we want here again is the image size. We definitely want that, and the image itself, but none of the other stuff. So we don't care about tint, draw as, tiling, or mirroring. We do care about image. We don't care about margin. We don't care about outline. We need these two things. If I split the struct pin here, then we can decide 32 by 32 again, because that's our standard size. We want to definitely set that. And then the image would go here. So that is the thing. That's part of our slate brush. Okay. The other thing we need to do is the color of the item. I want to kind of specify a color when you're in a hover state, right? So when I'm hovering over, I want the color to be gray. You can choose whatever color you want here. But let's make a slate color this time. Make slate color. There it is. And you can specify a color. I want to make it gray. So again, easy way to make gray is pull this towards the middle and then pull it down to something like this. Kind of a dark gray. There it is. And that's the color. Now I could select different things, use color rule, specify color. I can leave these the way it is. I'm not actually inputting anything, but that's fine. And then I want to get the item info again. Here's item info. And I want to break it break the item info down. I only care about the image. I don't care about the other stuff, so we can get rid of all of that and just have item image. Here it is. And we're just going to tint it with this new color. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a slate brush. Make slate brush here. I do care about the tint, and I also care about the image and the size. So that's the things I care about. So I can do, kind of better to do this. Tint, I care about image and image size. Those are the three things I want. So here's the tint, that's this. Here's the image, that's this. And here's the image size. Split the struct pen and make this 32 by 32. Okay, so that is, those are a couple of things I've done here. So one is slate brush for the image when it's normal, and a slate brush for the image when it's hovered or when it's selected. Okay, so now we can make a button style. Make button style. There it is. And all we care about, let's deselect all. We care about normal, hovered, or selected. Those are the three things we care about. All right. So we care about normal. Normal is this one, and so is pressed. So when it's normal or pressed, I want to see the image, the actual image. But when I'm hovering over it, I want to see it with a gray tint around it. Again, you can decide, instead of a gray tint, you want to make a gold tint or a red tint or no tint. It's up to you. All right, but that's how it's going to look right now. And I'm showing you ways of modifying your user interface so that it's more interesting, you know, than it was before. So then I want to get the button. We haven't applied it yet. We want to get the item button. And we want to set style to this new style we've just created. Okay, so there it is. So this should be net new for you. You haven't probably done this stuff for the most part, at least not with me so far. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to set the text as well. Now this is optional, but here's the item name. So the question is, do you need text for the item when you have an image? Set text. Here it is. And you know, so then again, I'd have to get the item info. And then we want to break the struct, but now all we need is the name of the item. And this is what you can see name works well as a type, because that's what we want to set the text with. We want to set the text of the icon with the name of the item. Okay. Now again, I could have pulled all these wires all over the place. I'm not a fan of that, as you know. So this is set up icon, item, icon, to show the image of the item. To show the image and name of the item. Now again, you may decide to remove the name. That's perfectly fine. We just chop off this part right here. Okay, but you should know how to do that for each of the items. So this is, for the most part, how we set the icon. Now we haven't done it yet. We've just made the function to do that. To do this, we want to go back to the event graph, and in the event construct, I want to call the set icon function. If you don't do this, then it won't be set. Okay, compile and save. And this is our inventory item blueprints. Let's put that up. So there we go. Okay, so we've got our inventory item, which is pretty good. And now as we chug along, we're going to get to a new blueprint, a widget blueprint. This is more complex. And this is going to create the, the inventory, the way it looks, the inventory item itself. Okay, so that's what we need. So here's the new blueprint, widget blueprint. And I'm going to go here and let's add in a new widget blueprint. There we go. And for this one, we need a canvas. So we start off with a canvas panel. And once we have the canvas panel, then what we want to do is we want another canvas panel under that one. So another one, like so. So there's two canvas panels, the first one and the second one. So here's the second one. For the second canvas panel, we want to call it inventory canvas. And is a variable is chosen. The other thing we want to do is we want to set things up like this. So if I go to anchors, if you open it up, you can see minimum and maximum. And what we want is 0, 0. Position is 50 and 200. That's where it's going to be in our HUD. And then it's going to be 200 and 415. Sorry, 415 and 200. 415 and 200 wide. That's how big the inventory is going to be, right? So it's not very large. You know, again, you could make this different. And this is kind of the inventory panel itself. That's where all the inventory items are going to be shown. Again, you can make this so it's much larger, a big inventory panel that pops up and goes away. It's up to you. I made it small. The other thing that we want to also do, which didn't say here, is if I kind of look at visible, right now the visibility is not hit testable self only. Let's choose to make this hidden by default. So by default, our inventory will be not shown. We're going to toggle it on and toggle it off later on. So compile and save. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to add an image and call it background. So again, we've done this before. So image, here's our image. Pull that in, and we'll call this background. That's the background image. And then again, it says ensure the anchors are set to full and the image is set to black. So again, back to this. So anchors set to full is this anchor right here. Okay, that's the first thing. And then image is set to black. So again, if I go to brush, if I go to image, let's type in black. This will choose the black texture that's part of the engine itself. Okay. Then let's make sure we follow these things. So 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, minus 50. So it's going to be kind of out here. And then 0, 0 for everything else. So minus 50, but 0 and 0 makes it so it kind of takes up that entire space. Okay, so compile and save, please. So that's your background. Next, once we have our background in place, we want to add in a new text element that's going to display like inventory. That's what it's going to be, right? So let's add that in. So again, text. And it's going to be underneath the text background. And again, it's going to say inventory, for that's the text. That's what it's going to display. So the text itself, inventory. But we want to put it in a special spot. So again, from an anchor's perspective, minimum is 0.5. We want to look at that. And maximum is 0.5. So that kind of repositions the anchor so it's in the middle, right? Position is 0, 0. So 0 and 0, which makes it so it's the middle. Size is 151 and 40. There we go. And then alignment is 0.5 and 1. So it kind of puts it up here, right? And we want to choose a golden color or something else that makes it different, you know, for here. I also want to make it so it is italic, right? So kind of an italic thing. Roboto is what I've chosen. That's just the way it is, but you can make it so it's bigger. But what this does is it kind of makes it so it looks like this. There's your inventory. Very simple. And this will be the inventory label. Inventory label. Just a label for the that says inventory. Compile and save. All right. Next, what we want to do, and this is trickier, we'll add a scroll box to the inventory canvas. So scroll box. We'll add that to the inventory canvas. There it is. Here's a scroll box. And with the following settings, and this is important to get right. Okay, otherwise it won't work properly. It won't look right. Okay, so again, anchors is 0011 here. This is important, 11. And then everything else 0. So make sure that all of these are zeroed out. Okay, so it kind of looks like this. Kind of takes up that entire space. That's a scroll box. So please make sure it's that way. If you don't, it won't work properly. It won't look right. Okay, that's your scroll box. Then add a uniform grid panel to the scroll box. This is new. Uniform grid panel to the scroll box. Right, so it's a child of the scroll box. And we'll call this the inventory panel. There's the inventory panel. We'll make that is variable. And let's add the following stats to this one. So again, slot padding is what we want. So slot padding, again, if you look here, it's 20, 10, 20, 10, and then 5 and 10. So what this is how much each of these items, they're 32 by 32, how much space is there between items, right? So that's what the right is. To the right at 5, to the left is 20, so it's about 25, kind of towards the left more than towards the right. Top is 10, bottom is 10. That's the kind of spacing that we have in terms of units between everything. So that's one thing. It should be auto and left horizontally aligned, right? And this one, okay, so that's this right here, which is vertical alignment is fill vertically. So it's going to fill vertically and left align. Okay, that's what it's going to be. And that is your inventory panel. That's what that is. Okay, so compile and save. There we go. Make sure the inventory canvas, yeah, that's this. Very good. Next. Now we're going to open the event graph, and this is where all the funkiness comes into play. So first we need several variables. One of them is called character. Let's do that. So I'll add a new character variable in there. And this is of type BP_MP character. Object reference. Let's make that something we can see. Row, column, and column length are all integers, right? So row, column, and column length are all integers. Let's compile and save this and set the column length. The default value for column length should be 4. So there's only 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. In our example, for you, you could change the column length to whatever you want to make it larger or smaller or whatever. If you want to make it like only 2 or 1, it's up to you how you want to make your inventory look. Okay? So that's column length. Then we'll initialize the inventory panel and create a custom event named rebuild inventory, but it's actually going to be 2 custom events. One of them is going to be called rebuild inventory client. The other one is going to be rebuild inventory server. Okay, so that's how we're going to do it. So let's start with that. So let's build 2 custom events. Again, I don't need the pre-construct. I don't need the event tick. I do need the event construct. Here, we're going to make it so that there is a delay. Again, sometimes what happens is if we don't add a delay with user interface stuff, especially with multiplayer, both players are being instantiated at the same time as the inventory is being built. And then what happens is you get weird null reference errors, which is not what we want. Okay, so that's why the delay is important. We're going to add 2 custom events. The first one is going to be called rebuild inventory client. This will be run on owning client, reliable, and then there'll be another one, add custom event, rebuild inventory server, right? And again, we just want to choose server on this one and maybe spell it properly. There we go. So these 2 events. Okay, we're going to come back to this. Next, what we want is a sequence node, right? That comes from here, sequence node. And what we want is when I call these 2 events, they're going to go right to the sequence node. There's not going to be a delay. The only delay we need is really for the event construct. When the inventory is first being constructed. Otherwise, we're going to get these weird null reference errors, as like I said. So we're going to do that. Then in the sequence node, there are going to be the first sequence is we're going to initialize the inventory panel for the first time, or when we rebuild it, every single time we add it, we're going to rebuild the inventory panel again. So we're going to set the row, and we're going to set the column to 0. We're going to start that off at 0, 0. Okay, that's the first part. And then the next thing is we're going to look at the inventory panel, and because the inventory panel is of type grid, right? If you actually look at the inventory panel, it is a grid, uniform grid. Then what we want is we want to clear children. So what this does is it removes all the children that's in the grid. Right now we don't have any children in the grid, but eventually we will, and that's what this will do. And let's add a little reroute node here. And what we're going to do is we're going to move all this up here, and this will be initialize inventory panel. So initialize inventory panel. Okay. There we go. The next part on the next page is a little trickier. We're going to get a character reference. So there's our character right there. And what we're going to do is we're going to get the inventory size. So get inventory size. So if you've chosen to make it 8, that'll be 8. But you can choose to make it bigger. I want to subtract 1 from it. So inventory size -1. So let's say if it's 8, it's going to go to 7. Then I want a for loop that's going to go from 0 to 7. So through all the inventory items, basically. That's what it's going to do. And what it's going to do here is, let's get another reference to the character one more time. We're going to get the inventory, the actual inventory for all the stuff that's in inventory. And we're going to get the index, so whatever this index is, so 0, 1, 2, 3. As an example, we're going to get the index from the loop. That's what this is. And we're going to use that as to get the item from the array. That's what this is. It's an array of items, right? Once we've got the item, what we want to do is, again, access the character. And we want to get the player index. Player index. There we go. And we're going to use the player index to decide which player the inventory is going to be rebuilt for, right? And we're going to create a item. So create a widget. So this is where we create a widget, and it's of type WBP inventory item. Notice now, because of our expose on spawn, we get these two inputs. One is for player input, and the other one is for item info. Otherwise, if you did not expose them, you won't have them here, right? Then we're connecting it. And what this does is it loops through and creates those inventory items that are going to be put in place inside of our grid, right? Once we have the inventory item, what we want to do is we want to add child to uniform grid. So we're going to get the inventory panel, this one, and we're going to add child to inventory grid, to uniform grid, and we're going to specify our row and column. So row, column, there it is, row and column, whatever those are. And then the content is going to be coming from this new item that we're adding in. So that is the content. So if you notice, it's a inventory item object reference. The uniform grid is going to take in that reference, and it's going to basically in place that item as we go. Okay, and there you go. There you have it. Okay, compile and save. Questions around this? We're not quite done yet, because now we need to increment our row and column. We haven't done that. Right now it's 0, 0, right? So now the next part and I'll just kind of put the comment in. For every item in the inventory, create a new icon. That's what's happening here. It's an icon button more than anything else, right? So for every item in inventory, create an icon button is what it is. More than anything else, an icon button. So after we've created the button, what we want to do is we want to increment the column and the column length and the rows, so that we know we can kind of add them into the right spaces. So we're going to say column plus plus, increment the column, right? And then we want to check to see if it's greater than or equal to the column length. If it is, we're at the end. Now we're going to go to the next row, as an example. So branch, if it's true, then what we want to do is we want to increment the row now. Row plus plus. And we also want to set the column back to 0, because it's going to go to the first column again. So again, we're going to set the column to 0. So this is our way of, counting which column everything is going to be in, kind of very simply. And it's cyclical, so it's going to go back to, it'll keep going to the next row, right? One thing we haven't checked here is if we're only ever going to have 8 items and you add to the next one, it'll take up the first one, kind of thing. But for now, this will leave a hole, right? Increment column, and then if column is greater than or equal to, if column is greater than or equal to column length, then increment row and set column to 0. That's what that is, really. So kind of, I may have wrote it differently in the PowerPoint, but for the most part, that's what it does. All right, so that, my friends, is how we rebuild our inventory, or build it for the first time. So when the first time happens, we have a delay, it builds out the inventory, and it's all empties because there's nothing in inventory. However, when we get an inventory item, we're going to call one of these two methods, one of these two custom events. Client, when we're using the onRep notify, and server, when we're adding an inventory item. Okay? Compile and save. So that is this. And one thing is the column length, like I said, should be set to 4. If you haven't set that already, that would be a problem if you didn't do that. Next, let's activate. We'll take a short break in a second. Let's activate the inventory system. So activating it requires a couple of changes. So one of them is in MP character. Back to that. So back to, we can close this down now. Go back to MP character. And I want to go to the event graph and event begin play. So double click there. And it'll take you to this part right here. Okay? So the first part that we want to add in is we want to add this just after adding the overlay. We want to add this new part for our overlay, a new overlay, right? So again, over here, I want to create another widget. So create widget, and of type this time WBP. Instead of an inventory item, we want player inventory to be added this time. So player inventory, and then notice that we're missing character. Right? Here we show character, and I want to show you this, but here we don't have it. Why? Because what we should have done, and I didn't say this in the PowerPoint slide deck, we should have exposed on spawn. Now, to do this properly, let's delete this node first, right? And go back to the inventory, player inventory, and when we go back to the graph, hit the character, and right here we say expose on spawn, compile and save. Okay, it's important. That's what we needed to do here. Then if I go back and create widget and I specify WBP player inventory, now we have this extra input for character. That's important. This refers to self. Okay, so this is going to basically set the character itself. When this is created, it'll set a reference to the character. Instead of the character getting a reference the other way, when I already have a character and I'm making a reference to it. That's what's happening. Okay, that's a little bit better in terms of the way it's done. So this is where the thing gets created. We want to make save the reference, so we'll save promote to variable, and we'll call this player inventory HUD, right? That's what that is, player inventory HUD, and that's just saving a reference as a variable. Then we're going to add it to viewport. So then we're going to add to viewport, and that'll add to the player's viewport. Now, right now, it's going to be hidden by default because that's how we've done it, right? Compile and save. And that right there, it's add the player inventory HUD to the viewport. So add player inventory HUD to the viewport. Otherwise, you won't see it. Now, even though it's hidden, it's still there. It's just turned off, kind of thing. Compile and save. Next, we want to set the player index from the game mode. All right, so again, to do this, we want to add in another sequence. And just to make room, I'm just going to zoom way out here and pull all this stuff down. Again, there is a, you know, kind of a utility to making another graph. Some people like to do that. Like they put only the event begin play on one graph, and then they put something else on the other ones, like all the inputs on another graph. That's not a bad way of organizing, but I also don't want to confuse you guys. Like if you go back and like, well, he has event begin play, but I don't have it. Well, it's on the other graph, right? Because again, you can make, like we said before, multiple graphs. Right now, there's only one event graph, right? Okay, so I want to make another node, and then what I want is I want to get the game mode. So get game mode, here it is. Now this happens sometimes. If I cast to BP_MP game mode, for me it comes up, but it may not come up for you. Sometimes what you need to do is compile, save, and then close down your character and reopen it, and then it'll be available. Otherwise, this won't come up. Right, we need to do this because if we don't cast to a specific game mode, which is our game mode, then we won't have the detail that we need. From the game mode, we're going to get the number of players. So get num players. This kind of counts how many players are in the game, right? And then we want to subtract 1 from it. Subtract 1. So we're going to count starting at 0. And then we're going to save this as the player index. So again, if you notice way down here, we have a player index. We're just going to set the player index to whatever this is. And there we go. So that right there, what that does is set the player index from the game mode. We need to do that. So set player index from the game mode. That's a pretty good way of doing it too. Instead of you having to get the player number and all that stuff that we were doing before, you don't have to do it this way. You can do it this way. It's a little easier, and it kind of counts the number of players and all that stuff. Next, what we want to do is we want to create a custom event called initialize inventory server. Let's do that. So that would be way down here. If I'm making a new custom event, it's going to be at the bottom. So add custom event, initialize inventory server. I'm going to make it so that it's on the server. Oops, on the server. Mark it as reliable. And then what you want is you want to get the inventory size. So that's this one. Get inventory size -1. And what we want to do is we want to construct our inventory based on this. So we're going to make a for loop. For loop. Here it is. So from 0 to inventory size -1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get our inventory. Here's our inventory. And then we're going to add an empty item. This constructs an empty inventory. So it actually makes so that our inventory is going to have, in our case, 8 items. Add, right? So that's what this does. Okay. And the reason why there's nothing here is because it's an empty inventory item. Empty inventory items like are empty, empty, 0, 0, 0, all that stuff that comes up. Compile and save. So that's the initialize inventory server. We want to call this method in a new sequence layer again. So going back to that event begin play, then I want to add another sequence layer here, and this is where we're going to check if I have authority. So this is, again, multiplayer stuff. If it's true that I have authority, then what do I want to do? Initialize the inventory on the server. So this is going to initialize it for both all players. In our case, both players. Right? So initialize inventory. All this does is it creates 8 empty inventory slots, right? So that way, it's when the inventory is going to be drawn, right? It's going to draw just empty, 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 or none, none, none the entire way. That's what it's going to do. Okay. Again, I'm just going to reorganize our event begin play, just so that way it's looking a little nicer, like this, and gives us some more room if we're going to add anything else. Compile and save. So those are the 2 modifications that we've done in the event begin play, but we have another thing to do. So we mentioned that the inventory itself uses on-rep inventory or rep notify, and so again, whenever we do that, it creates a function on-rep inventory that would be created for us. This one, on-rep inventory, and this will trigger whenever we change the inventory in some way. Right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to get a reference to our player inventory HUD. So that's down here. And we want to make it so it's a validated get, which means we're checking to see that it's not, null. And once we've done that, we've confirmed that, then we're going to rebuild inventory on the client. So rebuild inventory. I would call it something different here. I'm going to fix that. Inventory client. Okay. So it's instead of rebuilt, it should be rebuild. Okay. You guys didn't even say anything. Rebuild inventory client. So this one's going to trigger. So whenever I update the inventory item, if I add an inventory item, the client is going to update, right? And that's when that's one thing it's going to do. But I want to update both the client and the server. Compile and save. And again, this is one way of doing it. There's other ways of doing to getting the same results. I found this one is a good, reliable way of doing it. Okay. And that's this. Okay, so that is, now I want to toggle it on and off, and then we'll take a short break. Okay, so let's do that. So for this, I need a new action. So again, if I go to input actions, and I want to add in a new input action, we're going to say IA toggle inventory. Okay, IA toggle inventory. And then what I want is I want a new mapping for this IA toggle, and it's going to use the tab button. So when I click the tab button, it's going to toggle the inventory. Now again, if we want to use controller, we may decide to use another button. A lot of times on the controller, we might use, kind of the closer button and to the face button. So we have the face buttons here, right? And then there's this close button right here, right? And that one, if you look at the, if I go to gamepad, right? So notice that there is gamepad face buttons, right? And then there's special left and special right. So I think the special right is what it's going to be. So that's the one that's going to trigger it. Okay. So that is the one that I want to, if I press that button, the inventory is going to come up on my controller, you know, as an example. Okay. Save. And now that I have that, then what I can do is I can create an enhanced IA toggle inventory in the player event graph. Let's just close these down. So this will go at the bottom again, so way at the bottom. Because this is a new thing, so I'll say IA toggle inventory. I want to do this on started, and I want to use a flip-flop node. The reason why for this is because if I'm here for the first time, it's going to show it, and then if I'm not there, it's going to hide. If I go back, it's going to hide it. So for the first time, I want to get a reference to the player inventory HUD. Here it is. And I want to get the inventory canvas, get inventory canvas. There it is. And I want to set visibility to visible. So that's the first thing I want to do. That's if I'm here, I'll want to turn it on, you know, kind of thing. I also want to get the player controller. Let's do this at the same time. So get player controller. There it is. And I want to change the way that the inventory gets focused. So we can get the player inventory HUD. And what I want to do is I want to set input mode, game, and UI. So set input mode, game, and UI. This is the one I want. And you do that from the player controller. Okay. And so that means that I can play the game and I have I get focused on any my user interface. Okay, that's what it means. So I can keep playing while I have my user interface up. Now you may just choose to do something else. Now the player inventory HUD is the widget that I want to focus on, right? I also want to get the player controller, and one thing I'd like to do with this one is set the mouse cursor, show the mouse cursor. So again, show mouse cursor, set show mouse cursor. And I want to show the mouse cursor when I'm in this mode. When I'm showing my inventory, when I turn it on, I want to show the mouse cursor. All right, when I'm turning it off, I want to hide the mouse cursor. Okay, now you may choose not to do this. It's up to you if you feel that that is very intrusive. On the other hand, I want to set visibility to hidden if I'm here again. So again, I'm just going to go, if I kind of toggle this off, if it's already on, I want to turn it off. So this is what it does, turns it off. And then I want to get the player controller again. And I want to set the input to game only. So set input mode to game only. So no more user interface. It's not going to have any influence on the user interface anymore. That's what this is going to do. Okay? And then I also want to get a reference to this, but I want to turn the mouse cursor off. So I'm going to move all these down a little bit because they're a little bit too tight. Let's just move those down. There we go. And move this down. Okay. So that is a way I'm controlling my toggle. Again, there's many ways to do this thing. Flip-flop node is very, very efficient. Instead of me having to code, like if it's on, turn it off. If it's off, turn it on. Flip-flop mode. Now, one thing to note about the flip-flop mode is it only works within the event graph. So if you actually were to take this thing and then collapse it to a function, flip-flop node would stop working. It's left FYI. It does have a problem with that. So that's this. And now let's test it. Okay, and we'll stop for a short break. So again, compile and save. And if we press play, then what you should get is not a crash like this. So I'm going to get a crash here. We'll see what it does while I'm getting a crash. Hopefully you didn't get a crash. But it gives me a exception access violation. And let's see what it's telling me to do. Right? So it says the So again, don't just try and fire up the engine again after this. All right, it tells you what the problem is, like what's causing the issue, right? So you start reading. This is kind of the call stack. That's what's going on here. So it says unversion property serialization. That's what's happening. You're starting something that's not happening. That's not connecting. So, and that's the issue, right? So something that we're trying to access that is not initialized, right? The rest you can see here are just, it's not, it's something you've done, put it this way, right? But that's what's going on here, okay? So let's restart, let's send and restart, and hopefully we'll fix the issue. And the way to do this, of course, is to start disconnecting. Disconnect this, disconnect that, right? So we know a couple things, right? We know that, here it is. So one asset editor quit. Let's make sure I got that proper. Oh, sorry, my mic is in the way. There we go. Okay, so instantly we've got this error, right? And it says compile and save because we're missing some stuff, right? So one of the things that we're missing is the action. I lost my input. So let's try this again. So I'll go into input, input action, IA, toggle. That's what happens. Inventory, when you don't save. Save all. And then my mapping is probably there. And now we're good. Save that mapping. So I saved the mapping, but not the item. And I have to take this away and put it back. So we'll say IA underscore toggle inventory. We don't want the action to be triggered. We want it to be started and compile and save. Let's also go do a file save all. Now it still may crash, but at least we've saved everything. Now let's try it again. Yay. Okay, so that's what it was. So now if I press tab, we have this inventory. Okay, so we can, this is what you should see. Okay, and same thing if I press tab on this one. So both of them should show you this. Okay, does that make sense? And they're different. If I kind of take this inventory away, the other one is still there. If I have this inventory away, then the other one isn't there. And we can see that there's 4 items. If I press stop, we should not get an error. If you get an error where it says something like, oh, your inventory is not good or whatever, or there's a, some kind of weird error, that's what the problem is. So let me put this up on DevOps now, and this is kind of so far a good place to stop. So git add dot, git commit minus m, we'll say added first version of blank inventory. That's what it is, right? And let's take a short break. It's 4:44. I want to take 5 minutes or so, then come back and continue. We've got more to do, and this is the we've done a lot of the heavy lifting already. Okay, believe it or not.